So my second point is about the connectionalism of the early Methodist societies. Within a decade of John Wesley's first open-air preaching in April of 1739, an elaborate nexus of societies, classes, and bands and other institutions had grown up in addition to, and sometimes in tension with, the connectional structures of the Church of England. John Wesley's plain account of the people called Methodists, a published open letter composed in 1748, gives an account of some of these institutions. By late 1748, the societies, quote, in connection with Mr. Wesley, close quotes, had developed in such a way that society had become the term for the large gathering of Methodists in a city, usually meeting only quarterly for the love feast. Classes had taken the place of older societies as the locus of weekly meetings for accountability, and an elaborate system of specialized bands and other groups had grown up around them. In addition to these, the Methodists in the Wesley's connection had built preaching houses, orphanages, and poorhouses. They were involved in charitable work, including housing, clothing, loans to poor people. They were involved in education. They had developed a wide range of local officers, including class leaders, stewards, widows, and assistants. Although it details the development of each of these uniquely Methodist institutions, though, the plain account of the people called Methodists does not describe at all the distinctive preaching institutions of early Methodism, including their circuits and, by that time, in 1748, their annual conference. To us, this omission may seem rather strange. After all, weren't the Methodists, and the Wesleys in particular, known for their itinerant preaching? But there were two reasons why Wesley may have elected not to discuss the Methodists' itinerant and lay preaching in this letter. In the first place, there seems to have been a fairly well delineated distinction between the lay and locally led institutions described in the plain account of the people called Methodists on the one hand, and the institutions of Methodist preachers, lay and ordained, on the other hand. Except for the fact that Wesley and the preachers regularly met with the societies, far less often with the classes, the system of classes, bands, and the like were fairly self-perpetuating, and in this sense did not really rely on Wesley's oversight or the oversight of other preachers. In the second place, though, the plain account of the people called Methodists was originally addressed to the Reverend Vincent Perronet, or Perronet, the vicar of Shoreham in Kent, and one of the few ordained priests of the established church who had supported the ministry of the Wesleys. There was nothing shocking or particularly un-Anglican about these societies and classes and other institutions detailed in the plain account. Religious societies had existed within the Church of England for decades, since the time of the Restoration in the 1660s, and an Anglican reading of the plain account might conclude that the activities of the Methodists in connection with Mr. Wesley were as innocuous and as legal as the activities of other Methodist societies. The preaching institutions, however, both the utilization of lay preachers and the practice of itinerant preaching, were consistently a source of offense to the Anglican establishment, and with good reason. Within hours of his first preaching at Bristol, the Bishop of Bristol fired off a letter to Wesley, as he had done to Whitefield a few weeks earlier, informing Wesley that open-air preaching violated an Anglican requirement that all preachers should have license, that means permission, not just a slip of paper, from the bishop, and pointing out that he was contravening the Act of Toleration that specified that all religious services should occur either in Anglican churches or chapel or in registered dissenting places of worship, and simply preaching in the open air did not conform to that. Moreover, preaching by lay preachers was considered, and not just considered, but with very good reason, was believed to be contrary to the Articles of Religion. One of the Anglican articles stated that it is not appropriate for a person who has not been duly trained and duly commissioned to preach the Word of God. And they could turn that against John Wesley and the other preachers. So I can see why he would emphasize only these lay-oriented societies in the document called A Plain Account of the People Called Methodists. The preaching institutions were the ones that Charles Wesley would eventually give up by 1757 or so, and his own part of the Methodist movement, what some people call church Methodists, would remain in canonical and legal conformity to the Church of England, but that's really not true with the movement that John Wesley was leading, and it was the preaching institutions that were leading consistently in the direction of either a de facto or a legal de jure separation from the Church of England.